third year in a row and helped kick off Burlingame Reads 2021. I love working with Elaine, especially as we are strongly committed to the library's focus this year, which is environmental and racial justice. And this year also, the stars have aligned, and we are very fortunate to have as our co-collaborator none other than Kevin Madrigal. Kevin is a food justice advocate and decolonizer of health. He is a first generation Chicano, hijo de su chingada madre from Sur, San Francisco. In 2016, he co founded Farming Hope in San Francisco to provide employment opportunities in food for folks experiencing homelessness. Kevin is a recipient of the Brooklyn Poets Retreat Fellowship for 2021, and his work has been featured in The Boiler, the Anti-Lang Project, Edible East Bay, Civil Liberties United, Quiet Lightning number 98, and Chicana Vegan issue number 2. Kevin brings light and pride to the comunidad backdrop on which many American lives depend. In his free time, you can find him cooking vegan enchiladas verdes to highly curated R&B playlists. Kevin is also born and raised in South San Francisco, in San Mateo County, of course. Kevin, before you read, please tell us more about Farming Hope and the cooking and food justice classes that you've been teaching lately.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction, Eileen. It's such an honor to be introduced and to be in a space with the San Mateo County Poet Laureate. Um, it's there. I feel like there that needs to be shouted out more. There are very few, I feel like, poets that are really from the 650 San Mateo County area. Alan is one technically. um, yeah, my name is Kevin Madrigal. I'm from South City, and I was fortunate enough to start this nonprofit called Farming Hope in San Francisco. And Farming Hope in the beginning was really just this idea of like, how can we rethink homelessness and rethink these issues that San Francisco and the whole Bay Area struggles with. So right now it is a food service company that employs and empowers specifically formerly incarcerated and formerly homeless individuals. And they're currently providing like, I think on the amount of like 3,000 meals a week to different shelters around the Bay. And they're going to be opening up some restaurant stuff in the near future as soon as things are allowed again. Um, yeah, I think it was something like growing up in the Bay. I think you see a lot of issues around poverty and wealth inequality. My family like grew up like as an immigrant home, so I think just getting involved in this type of work, it like made sense. Yeah, I think Parable of the Sower is such a great book to think about environmental justice, think about justice locally too. Well, one, because it takes place in the 2020s and around a time where like climate change has caused disaster and all these things. So like basically now, and two, I think just there's so many different ways that you can think about justice. And when people talk about like climate justice and environmental justice, I think they think like greenhouse gases and stuff, but it also means real things that affect our community. So thank you, Aileen. That was that on Farming Hope. You can go check out Farming Hope at farminghope.org if you want to learn more. Yeah, and so I wanted to open the space by reading a short excerpt from Parable of the Sower. It is basically in all of the chapters. There's almost like mini poems that open up the chapter. So this is the like mini poem that opens up chapter 9. All struggles are essentially power struggles. Who will rule? Who will lead? Who will define, refine, confine, design? Who will dominate? All struggles are essentially power struggles, and most are no more intellectual than two rams knocking their heads together. You gotta give the snaps where they're due. Yeah, so tonight, just came tonight. This poetry event just came out of me, Elaine, and Eileen having a conversation and talking about like dope poets that are tied to California, tied to this area in some way, and people that we think really kind of carry the spirit of justice forward in their own way. It doesn't always have to be like upfront and in your face. Yeah, and with that, I'm gonna read one poem, a short one. This one's called $15 Isn't Enough, and it will be in the Right Now San Francisco anthology that's coming up later this year. $15 isn't enough. Restaurants open and the Latinos of the mission are trapped first. Their lives essential for the economy, not the community. The rate is 5 Latinx to every 1 white in the city. A white man on a fixed bike makes a comment, "These rules are stupid." And I wonder what it's like to live with the privilege of misinformation. My family doesn't. My family can't. We know too well the reality of this black and brown blood machine. This isn't new, just more carbon-based fuel. There will be a day in the future where the pandemic has passed. Its victims just memories and landfill mass. The Latinx essential workers will no longer receive praise. Instead, they'll receive minimum wage. Cool, thank you all. And I'm going to be passing it to Aileen, who's going to be introducing one of the first invited poets that we brought here to speak. Aileen.
Thank you, Kevin. Your work and your poem and the work you do and the excerpt you read really highlight empathy and community, which are some of the major themes in Octavia Butler's stunning novel, Parable of the Sower. And speaking of stunning, I am so excited to hear this poet read live from her new book. She is none other than the brilliant Janel Pineda. Janelle is an LA-born Salvadoran poet and educator. She has performed her poetry internationally in both English and Spanish. She has been published in LitHub, Hank, The Breakbeat Poets, Volume 4 Latinx, and The Wandering Song, Central American Writing in the US, among others. As a Marshall Scholar, she holds an MA in Creative Writing and Education from Goldsmiths University of London. Janelle's debut poetry chapbook, Lineage of Rain, is out now from Haymarket Books. Please welcome Janelle Pineda.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction, Aileen, and for having me here. I'm excited to be reading with all of you today. I was so happy to learn of the Octavia Butler kind of framing. Octavia Butler is such an important writer to me, also an important local writer to LA. So it's been awesome, and some of my work to teach her and to teach speculative fiction through Butler's work with youth in LA. So it was awesome. With that said, I'm going to read 2 poems today that are really inspired by her work, and I think in that lineage of dreaming towards other worlds or envisioning other worlds in order to make sense of this one. The first poem I'm going to read, I think, is a poem that I wrote in response to the violence of US imperialism, right, which leads to migration, which leads to all the reasons that people are displaced, especially in my family. This poem is In Another Life. The war never happened, but somehow you and I still exist. Like obsidian, we know only the memory of lava and not the explosion that created us. Forget the gunned-down church, the burning flesh, the cabbage soup. There is no bus, there is no border, there is no blood. There are only sweet corn fields and mango skins. The turquoise house and clotheslines, a heaping plate of pasteles and curtido waiting to be disappeared into our bellies. In this life, our people are not things of silences, but whole worlds bursting into breath. Everywhere there are children, playing freely, clothed and clean. Mozote does not mean massacre, and flowers bloom in every place shoes are left behind. My name still means truth, this time in a language my mouth recognizes, in a language I know how to speak. My grandmother is still a storyteller, although I am not a poet. In this life, I do not have to be. This poem somehow still exists. It is told in my mother's voice, and she makes hurt dissolve like honey in hot water, manzanilla warming the throat. You and I do not find each other on another continent, grasping at each other's necks in search of home. We meet in a mercado. My arms overflowing with mamey and anonas, and together we wash them in river water. We watch sunset fall over a land we call our own and do not fear its taking. I bite into the fruit, mouth sucking seed from substance, pulling its veins from between my teeth. Our laughter echoes from inside the cave, one we are free to step outside of. We do not have to hide here. We do not have to hide anywhere. A torogos flies past my face, and I do not fear its flapping. Thank you for holding that poem. That is it's the first poem in my chapbook, and the reason for that is it's a poem that kind of looks back to the past, right, and tries to imagine what if things had been different. By contrast, the last poem in my chapbook is a poem that imagines a different future. It's called "And It Is Green." I have seen the future and it is green. Close your eyes and inhala 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhala. Open them now and see with me. Mommy and I still alive, viejitas together, rocking gently on the porch of a wood-framed house in a future worthy of our joy. Mommy's hair mid-length, loose silver over her shoulders, mis colochos tangled back into a single braid. We are mid-laughter. Her brown spotted hands and my own hold each other in the way of the newborn's grip, hand wrapped around a single finger, a sign of a flesh claimed as its own. Mommy's eyes glisten green. With her toothless smile, Mommy grins so big, she'll save the world all over again. Thank you.
That was incredible. Thank you so much, Janelle. It's so great to hear you, as opposed to just reading you. Y'all, she got this book out. It's in the chat. Support your poets. Support the poets. And thank you for invoking our mothers, our grandparents, our ancestors into the space. Yeah, those were they were the original stewards of this land, and I think we still have a lot to learn from them. I'm going to be introducing the next reader, who I am very excited to introduce. This is a dear friend of mine. And I think ever since I learned he's probably the first proper, whatever that means, poet that I ever met. And I think even since then, since I've met them like 2 years ago, I've still been like, whoa, this person is special. So I'm going to be introducing Randy James. Randy received an MFA in writing from the University of San Francisco. He has also studied at UCLA. His work has been published in Myriad, Westwind, Red Cedar Review, Palette, second place award, got money for that. I remember FEM, Newsmagazine, and the Rumpus. Randy has performed in venues across Los Angeles and the San Francisco Bay Area. His work was featured in Hayat Hyatt's Villanelle, which has been archived by Collectif Jeune Cinema. He is also a co-founder of At the Door, a monthly reading series that uplifts and features Black and brown voices. James's debut album, Shifters, is now available on Nomadic Press. Y'all, give a warm welcome to Randy James.
Kevin, thank you for that introduction. That was fabulous. Thank you. And thank you, Kevin and Aileen and Elaine for throwing this event and for inviting me. Today, I am going to read all new work. So I've never really read any of this and I'm a little nervous, but here we go. Okay, so the first poem is called They Move In and. They move in and watch how streetlights, familiar as the back of your hand, are given new grid alignments. They move in and watch how quickly the crosswalks are repainted. See those potholes mended? I see those spotless waste bins. The lots bought up, the freshly erected fences. And they like looking at you funny, like you're the one in need of banishment for not fitting into their manifest destiny. And a phone call by their hand can really end it all for a lie so thick that taking it away means, frankly, I'm so used to the violence of the lie that I'm more afraid of when they try and take responsibility for the bodies in their wake with that funny look on their face. Okay, thank you. The next poem is called California After You. I hesitate to Google California after fire because I know the engine will relay catastrophe, a hole the size of, a star the size of, a miracle. We can open our windows again, or a first time. The apocalypse glimpsed the taste of sealed fate and prophecy fulfillment. Primordial, we bore witness to your insatiability. Stratified, we amplify your incineration. Our use of you, both innovation and avalanche. Bonfire to hot plate to the burning Amazon. The telling is not a straight line. The show is all consuming. Paradise ruined, Berry Creek and Feather Falls, Blue River, Talent, and Vita. We're sifting the ashes, mourning lost circuits of knowledge lost to your flickering lips. Yet we hold hands as the temperature climbs, minds on the land at peace, minds on revival. Thank you. The next poem is called Nearly 70% in Just 50 Years. Humans are to blame, unprecedented, alarming, with only an overhaul to rectify. A fundamentally broken relationship between humans and the natural world. We're living like we live off 1.56 Earths. Destruction which can be prevented with conservation and restoration. Our loss driven by food production. 1/3 lost or wasted. Human-caused climate change. Human footprints causing irreversible erosion. Human-caused stressors. No part of the ocean is entirely unaffected. Thank you. This poem is called Feeling for the Wall for Breonna Taylor. Given a chance to see themselves, they closed their eyes as the system behooves. To them, her death and the life leading to it had no value. But holes in the neighbor's drywall, that's the real crime. I say, call it what it is, murder without hitch. Not even a reprimand, and here we sit. No glitch in the system, no broken, just this repetition they won't quit. Our skin, their phobia and erotics. They see our smiles and want a drink. They take the teeth, but not the hurt. If we're lucky, they leave some awful of empathy. Our fullness resides outside their discourse, bruh. Our freedom was never end goal. Our freedom is the glorious glitch. Each moment lived for ourselves, anew, insane. Every step planted a new world. Thank you. Going to read a poem called They've Taken the Love Out of Everything, Love. I show my color for the sake of others who hate me if they were to ever meet me. I show my color because the dirty truth is the world's been made to hate brown skin. I used to think I was safe. I thought and felt it often enough to slip in and on a veil of comfort always coated white, before the real world shook me rough, shook me right to say, fuck white supremacy. With God-given nimbi, everything out of us, a poem, at least a ballast of metered dancing, like the poem I bore witness to on 16th in Valencia. There's a thirst to prematurely fill our plots, but even when I trip or catch a sore throat, I dig us because we are poems. All of us, a subgenre of a subgenre, some a Villanelle, some a Rubaiyat, some a boring sonnet, some a sexy one with hot shit hair. And I have one more poem, pandemic poem number 33. We run our errands with mouths full of bloody empire. We like to leave a little of ourselves wherever we've happened to be. Some blood on square readers here, a little nosebleed over the counter there. Meanwhile, stocks rise for Transocean and the glaciers sun melt. As the song, I Had a Dream, I Was Falling Through a Hole in the Ozone Layer, cues on my playlist. And suddenly I miss my hatchback and the jagged tarmac that tore the wheels to bits. And now I want to roll down a verdant hill, ritual catching us in laughter forever. Olivia says N95s do nothing, are better meant for Halloweens, not this present peril where our bodies grow in distance and tether. Our Saturdays live streamed, our fun quarantined. We are unprepared with nowhere to take all of this raveling, apartments too full of our private revels. And yes, the trash man comes but once a week. With nothing to do, I make my bed again. Thank you very much.
Wow, there is so much power and pulse in your poems of witness and identity. Thank you so much, Randy, and congratulations on your forthcoming chapbook from Nomadic Press. Joining our lineup of powerhouse poets this evening is someone I think of as familia, the one and only Alan Chazaro, the author of This Is Not a Frank Ocean cover album from Black Lawrence Press and Piñata Theory, also from Black Lawrence Press, released in 2020. Alan is a graduate of June Jordan's Poetry for the People program at UC Berkeley, a former Lawrence Ferlinghetti Fellow at the University of San Francisco, and co-founding editor of Headfic, an online NBA zine. He chirps about Mexican memes, the Golden State Warriors, and Bay Area rap on Twitter. Alan also recently won the 2021 San Francisco Nomadic Press Literary Award. Congratulations, Alan. Please welcome Alan Chazaro.
Word, thank you so much. I'm hella excited to read my poems. I feel like I know most of the folks in this space very well. And yeah, I felt like when you guys were reading, it was like watching, you know, like Hooper's Hoop, and you're just like, you're on the bench, you're like, let me get in this game and ball out with everybody. So thank you for holding this space, for inviting me and sort of bringing us all together as family tonight. I'm gonna read a poem. It's called Self-Portrait as American. I say fuck because it feels right about now. And I say love because what wrong could it bring? I haven't shot a pistol since my stepdad flung his Desert Eagle from the bedroom and took us to burst freedom as kids. The smell of sulfur and devil, the pinch of steel between my 10-year-old fingers. I didn't seek this, was never good at hitting body-sized targets. kept my eyes shut while I curled the trigger. It's heavier than you think to hold and release thunder. Not like the movies, but somehow like the movies. Ears still ringing, vibrations in my bones. I remember distinctly writing that poem in 2016, right after Trumpito got elected. And I had nothing to say other than just this memory of one of my stepdads taking me to shoot a gun, and just how freaking American that is. All right, this is a poem of joy, and this is for the Bay right here, for the 650 and the 510, 408, 707. Who am I forgetting? Did I say the 415? Probably the biggest one. California Canto Funk. All black Chuck Taylors, because red or blue meant you could get jumped like Yasem on California Street. Even if you looked like me, shaggy hair, baggy shorts, skater wannabe, back when we'd let loose and cruise with 40s near freeways on weekdays because we never did homework. How could we stay cleaned up, growing up in the Bay? Drive around and see graffiti on fences, housing complexes where familias rented bounce houses for birthdays, every weekend blasting music from parking lots, everyone's invited. Our first apartment, full of immigrants, Vietnamese, Korean, Filipino, none like my family, all of them like my family. Behind the school with Samoans and Blacks, Persians and Russians, Cambodians, bodies poured and broken into these neighborhoods where we never knew ice, never saw snowfall, unless we tripped out to Yosemite or Tahoe, whenever primos visited from beyond Nevada or Texas, but never snowboarded because it was too expensive. Back home with cockroaches and bumblebees in empty fields, don't get stung by the super soaker. In places where E40 and Andre Nicotina made us slump in back seats, twisting our W's and blunts, coughing lungs until the sun came up. The time we climbed to the top of an abandoned building by 101 to overlook the jigsaw beneath us, our kingdom. We wanted more. Pacific Ocean at night, Santa Cruz and Sublime, barbecues on beaches, hope we don't crash, the summer dizzies. Our skin always killing the December air. On Christmas, eating tamales and playing football with cousins. Another barbecue. Wouldn't you? Why wouldn't we? Stay out of pocket, burn rubber at intersections, home of the hippies and hustlers, where you'll see a hood dude eating a French baguette and smoking a Black and Mild at the same damn time. Literally a whole ass baguette, just like taking bites out of it. One in each hand, jeans below his waist, middle of the day, metaphorical, finger up, in Safeway parking lots, beneath isolated stars, 93 till infinity, escaping the car's speakers. One way to experiment with virginity, all of this in one night or every night, happening or happened. It's all the same around here. I don't really read that poem much, but I feel like I should read it more often because I have the bays in my blood and in my bones. I'll end with this poem. It's called These Hours Are So Colored and Wasteful. We all carry certain amounts of piñata inside us, stringed to whatever tiny or giant truths we've tied ourselves to. Nowadays, there is so much dangling that I've forgotten the vowels crutched inside my mouth. Question, What would you say if I were California's redwoods and you were the morning frost clinging my branches? Explain the machinery of whale bones and the circuitry billowing our ribs. I want to believe that there is still electricity in my blood, that there is more to our days than these colored and wasteful hours being vultured. Give me what's next, the uncrossed canyon in your hands. Summon the perfect blunt hit. I need to know, would you rather crawl in your own thirst or feast through my starvation? Swing, they told me. Thank you. So excited to hear Greer, by the way, the young prodigy of the Bay right here.
Hey, thank you, Alan. That was dope. I think I just heard you. You do need to read that Bay poem more, because I just heard you read it for the first time a week or two ago, and I felt so proud to be from the Bay. I messaged him right after. Thank you so much for sharing, for blessing us with your presence and your poems here. Woo! All right, we've got one last featured poet. And as Alan alluded, I am also excited. I think y'all should be excited. We've got Greer Nakadegawa-Lee, who is a 17-year-old and a junior at Oakland Tech High. She has written a poem every day for over 2 years now, and she is the 2020 Oakland Youth Poet Laureate. Her first chapbook, A Heart Full of Hallways, is out now with Nomadic Press. Y'all give it up for Greer.
Hi, thank you guys so much for having me here. Thank you, Aileen, for inviting me. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who shared tonight. You guys are so amazing. And I'm really honored to share this space with you. And I'm very nervous to be performing after all of you because you're just that good. Oh my God. Okay. So my first poem is called Dear America. I wrote it after the murder of Breonna Taylor, and it feels especially important for me to perform it tonight because I've seen a lot of stuff on social media about hashtag Stop Asian Hate and things like that. And even in the best circumstances, even with well-intentioned people, sometimes racial justice is turned into a trend on social media. And it's happened a lot with Black Lives Matter. And I think it's going to happen with Stop Asian Hate. So that's why it was so important for me to read this poem tonight. Dear America, what is so hard about calling a rose a rose? About calling blood, blood? Police kill an unarmed Black woman in her own home, and suddenly murder isn't murder anymore. Suddenly, there's a whole lot of questions piling up about what people deserve. America, can you call a gun a gun? Can you call a child without adding that he was no angel? Can you call a kid, even when you kill him for whistling or throwing bread or playing in the park? America, do you know a lynching when you see it? Not since you pretended to close the history books on the KKK have you listened to us talk about the nooses swaying in the trees and not accused us of overreacting. Call it what it is, America. Not just troubling, not a misunderstanding, not a coincidence. Call it a threat on your citizens' lives and then act like it. America, remember tear gas is a war crime when you're using it on your own civilians. Call a rose a rose. Call a murderer even when he has a badge. Call yourself a country that cares more about white traditions than Black lives, and then remember that it's true. America, there are nooses growing in your trees again. America, I'm begging you, don't wait around for the harvest. This is my second poem. It's called From the Director's Chair. I wrote this before the shooting in Atlanta, but afterwards it just seemed to have so much connection to it because it's about how women of color are often used as just like in film, are just used as like obstacles in a white man's story and not treated as like the full people they are. So this poem is called From the Director's Chair. All my skin is on the cutting room floor. You're the director and you're cropping the shot. You're the director and you're crossing names out of the script in your red pen that marks up history and scrawls out the inconvenient parts. But we lived too. Every other piece of the color spectrum. We lived and we had our love stories and we had children. We built monuments out of our neighborhoods. The way we waved and smiled on the street and knocked on each other's doors in times of crisis, we lived too. You're the director and you're telling a story about the glory of war, about heroes. You're the director and you're telling a story about a good, honest man who falls in love with a beautiful foreign woman. But you don't find it necessary for the audience to hear her voice. How do I tell the director that she lived too? I tell him, I say, she sees through her own eyes. When she lifts her arm, it moves. She did not wait, preserved in amber for your protagonist to press play on her life and make her dance around the room. And you're the director. You say, every story needs subjects and every story needs objects. And I point to all the crossed out faces, all the skin on the cutting room floor and say, but we are never the subjects, but we lived too, even though no one bothered to teach you that sometimes we lived and it was bloody, bloody work. We lived when no one else wanted us to. We lived despite the voices in our heads trying to colonize the body, trying to leach the color out onto the sheets, trying to make us let go of the past and dizzy us with the colorblind future, but we lived, the tired and the angry and the hungry for stories like ours, we lived too. This is my last poem. It's called The Body. It all comes back to the body again. It is never just words. I mean, just a speech or just economic policy. I hide my love letters in poems and they hide their hatred and calls for states' rights and cries of Blue Lives Matter. And it took me so long to learn that all these things come to blood in the end. It is never just a matter of skyscrapers, of getting fish out of the ocean. It's about the undocumented fishermen paid in coins. It's about the hands that take the knife, that raise the saw and plunge it back into the earth. I'm saying it is always about the body, and aren't you sick of it? Aren't you also choking on the false innocence of politicians who've never seen the bodies their decisions lowered into the earth, never sat numb in the hunger their actions made? There are cities in America where it's illegal to give food to the homeless and people plucked off the street because they dared to protest violence against another body, and doctors forced to resign because they saved their patient's life but against someone else's religion. And all these things are about the body too. I'm saying it is all about the blood and it is also all about your hands. I'm saying in a country like this, the most radical thing we can do is take care of each other. Thank you all so much.
The most radical thing we can do is take care of each other. Thank you for that, Greer. That was incredible. Wow. That was so dope. I'm just like, I need to take a moment. If you need to take a moment, just take a deep breath. Put your praise in the chat. We still have about another 10 minutes of this event, and I did have some questions for the panelists, for the poets that joined us today. And I wanted to start the questions off with something a little bit more, a little light, and then we'll jump in to some things that are a little heavier. So this first question, you're okay if you want to be brief, it's totally fine. The first question for the poets, for the panelists is, what trait do you admire in others but don't possess yourself? If nobody volunteers to go, and then I will pick somebody.
Oh, sorry, Randy, am I interrupting you?
If you want to go, you spoke first, Greer, so.
I was just gonna say that I feel like other people, other artists especially, are really good about like crediting their influences and like talking about like these are the people that inspired me. And sometimes I just feel like I don't read enough. Like I wish I could do that more, you know?
I guess my thing is kind of, it's more of like a story type deal. I have, now getting all flubbed for words. I have what I was gonna say, but I would say I admire, I guess, the ability for people to see more even-handedly across the board. I don't know if that makes sense, but I tend to narrativize easily. So like, I admire poets who are able to see the world, you know, all aspects of the world, 360.
I guess I'll go here. As I've written more and more, I've gotten further away from directness and literalness. And I do admire when poems can just be straight up and talk about a problem head on. I find in poetry, it's easy to mask what you're really saying through language and through craft. And that's part of what intrigues me, to be honest, is sort of the mystery of it and the energy and the feeling of a poem. But as I've sort of been doing this longer, I've moved further and further away from what really brought me to poetry, was like my community and speaking about topics and calling things out directly. And again, poetry is such a like nebulous art form that the process can override and you can get sort of caught up in the abstract and the beauty of the abstract, right? But I do, you know, I'm trying to get back to some of that directness more.
Yeah, it's such a great question, Kevin. It was something I saw that and I was like thinking about it all day. Like, what are the qualities, right? I think something that I continually learn from in the people that I love in my life is to be able to move through the world with hope and faith and trust first. And I think that's something that's really hard for me to do sometimes. And it's not that I don't have those things, but it's hard for me to have that be my instinct, right? I think my instinct is worry, my instinct is fear, and kind of planning around that and trying to create ways of safety. And I think sometimes what it really takes for us to build the world we want to see is to have that leap of faith and trust that like this will work out. And I really, really admire the people in my life and in general who are able to kind of have that be the first like layer of engagement, and something I'm always thinking about.
Kevin, can I respond real quick? Is that allowed, sir?
Ale.
I struggle with that too, Janelle. And I often think about how, as sort of poets in particular, we're an extremely sensitive breed of humans. And we pick up very easily on, you know, like the environment or the vibrations of a space, right? And I think that kind of causes us to like be anxious and to overthink and to like analyze and to read the room literally, but also figuratively. And I agree with you. I have like a lot of my friends who they don't read poems and they don't care about poems, and good for them, right? But like they can move through a space and really not give any Fs, you know what I mean? But when I move through a space, I'm like trying to read everything and everyone, and it can be overwhelming and overloading. And I think that's part of our curse and our blessing as writers, is that we pick up very perceptively on a lot of things, even when we don't want to, I think. So I definitely feel you on that.
Sure. Thank you for that input, Alan. I have a couple more questions. This next one, obviously, it's in the context of all of the racial discrimination and hate crimes that we've been seeing on the rise in this country. And it's something I always reflect on and question why I'm surprised by it, because this is something that the system that we live in is designed to do, not something that is like a random byproduct, but it is designed to oppress people of color, Black people, Indigenous people. And so I just wanted to ask for each of y'all, how has this kind of the current time that we're living in, all this uprising and violence against communities affected your work in any aspect across the board?
I would say yes and no in a sense. I think because of my identities, the fact that I am visibly Black, the fact that I am visible, you can't see it now maybe, but visibly queer, those things affect me all the time. So all of my poetry kind of emanates from that point of view. I will say though that recently, with everything that's been going on, I have tried to or attempted to focus my my gaze outward and to kind of encompass more, go beyond the personal and try to see what's going on nationally or even kind of beyond myself, basically. So I would say that that has been the biggest, the thing that I've come away with the most from this past year, for sure.
I can jump in. When I think about the violence against like many communities, but in particular, when I think about like violence against Central American communities, I feel like a lot of it is in the silencing, in the dismissal, in like, and I think that's happened in so many ways. I feel like a lot of the reason that my work has focused so heavily on Salvadoran history has been because I think it's a history that was denied to me, and that there's so much trauma in even talking about some of this stuff, that I think part of the healing is naming it, naming the trauma that happened and finding ways to recover those stories. I even think now, like to current events, right? Like there are Central American children in cages right now. And like, I feel like it suddenly resurged a bit in the news, but I think that the way that media cycles work, right? Like things will have a focus on them in one moment and not so much in others, but these issues are ongoing. And I see my work as trying to continuously remind like these things are happening, right? And we need to talk about them.
For me, I think similar to both of you in different ways, but kind of like Randy said, I grew up with Mexican immigrant parents and a lot of my friends were undocumented growing up. So by ninth grade, I was already, I would say, maybe hyper aware of what privilege meant, even what being a US citizen means. And that's something that maybe you don't think about if you're in the middle of Iowa, right? Or wherever. So, and not to diss Iowa or anywhere, but I'm just saying, like, depending on who you are and how you grow up, you have to become aware of certain inequalities in this country because you're living in them. You don't have a choice. So that's always been my sort of space in poetry, or not even in poetry, but just in self and expression and community and culture. And I actually go to poetry to process all of this and to like make sense of it. So the way that these uprisings have sort of affected me was actually in the opposite, where I was, because I'm constantly living in these spaces and neighborhoods of oppression, I sort of started forcing myself to think more positively and like find joy. So I was like trying to write myself into joy more. And that's what part of the reason I read the Bay Area poem, if you remember, was like, I want there to be poems of joy and happiness and community and the good shit too, right? And I do use my art as that. And I don't mean that to neglect what the real world represents, because when I walk out of the door, I'm still a high school teacher, or I'm still working with community folks, but you can only take on so much of that work where you have to have spaces for like self-care and happiness and future possibilities and imagining what that world could look like. And for me, when I come to writing more and more, I try to use that space to cultivate that sense of gratitude and those sort of things that I don't always feel once I'm not in these spaces, or once I log off Zoom, or I'm, moving through the street. So I feel like it made me more conscious of that need for joy in my life.
I can really relate to that need for joy, Ellen. When I think about what's happening with like Asian American communities right now, I've been asked to speak on it a lot, and I'm grateful for that opportunity, obviously, but it can be exhausting. Sorry. And so just that space for joy, I think, has really become important for me too. But sometimes my work that isn't about just inequality or about activism, it sometimes feels less and less valuable to me. Which is disheartening, but it's just, true.
Thank you all so much for sharing. I know this is a very personal topic, so I really appreciate all of you speaking like so candidly and so really about how this has all affected your writing. I know we're coming to the end. I would love to just ask the last question. The last question, Janel kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but I think, as poets, we continue to write in spite of the oppression that's around us. We also continue to write, which means at some level, I think, like, we're optimistic. And I think in some ways poets are like the most pessimistic, but also most optimistic people. So this last question is very simple. What brings you hope?
I'll start because mine is so simple that I'm wearing it on my head here. Is for me, a lot of it is sports and the community that sports brings, and participating in sports, not just watching it, but like, just how much pride, like the Warriors, for example, like how it unifies. I've met people that are just walking down the street and you just start chopping it up because they're wearing like a Baron Davis jersey. And you're like, oh, you remember B. Diddy? And you just start talking, right? It's like such an easy. I've been literally in Greece and I saw a dude wearing like a Mexico soccer jersey and I just started talking to the dude. And like that, we became like, in that moment, we were unified and we became like connected in that moment, right? And then you might, get a drink with that person or whatever from there. But it's just such a easy way to bridge your interest with another person just by simply saying like, and it could be the opposite too. But even with like, I'm just going to take this moment to say I'm an A's fan, but I have no beef with the Giants fans. Like I love baseball. We're all cool, right? So let's all come together here. A's and Giants, baby. Let's go. World Series.
For me, I derive a lot of joy from music. Music is, I'm sure for a lot of people too, music it's a vibration. So, I think back to what someone told me a long time ago about, that familiar saying, you are what you eat, but you are also what you hear. So I've taken that to heart. Also dancing, but as a way of meditation, because I read something recently or saw something recently talking about meditation and movement, and I've been trying to key into that. So that's what brings me joy.
Mine's, more personal. It's just spending time with my family. It's actually brought me a lot of joy. Like, they haven't driven me completely crazy yet, which is cool.
I think, honestly, like seeing the way that people are resisting or organizing or building toward the world that we want to see, I think is the main thing that gives me hope, even at the worst that I could be feeling. I think to know that there are so many of us who are committed to leaving this world better than we found it. right? To leaving every space that we enter better than we found it. And I think there's so much joy in that solidarity, right? In being able to work together on that. And it means a lot to me. So yeah, that's what gives me hope.
Amazing. Thank you all so much. Yeah, I think Aileen, Elaine, do y'all have any last announcements that you wanted to make?
I just wanted to thank everyone for a powerful evening of poetry and community. You've all brought us so much joy and food for thought. And I'd like to encourage our audience to check out The Piñata Theory by Alan Chazaro, Lineage of Rain by Janel Pineda, Shifters by Randy James, A Heart Full of Hallways by Greer, Nakadegawa-Lee, and Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. The library will also be including these books in their catalog shortly, and you will be able to check them out. Thank you to my phenomenal co-hosts, Elaine Tai and Kevin Madrigal.
Of course. And thank you so much to Kevin and Aileen for really putting this all together, and for these amazing poets for joining us. Who many of whom I'm meeting now, but are amazing. And yes, books are, most of them are on order. Actually, they're all on order, so they should be in soon. And could I ask to end off, Kevin and Aileen, what brings you joy?
My cats and my mom's dog. What brings you joy, Elaine?
Kevin still needs to go too.
I think lately what has been bringing me joy. I was gonna say the first way I was gonna phrase it. Fuck it, excuse me. I'll say it. Old people. I just feel like there's so much that we have to learn from our elders. My grandma has been spending time with our family. She's 92, so that's what I mean when I mean old. So everybody that's in their like 40s, 50s, 60s, I wasn't targeting you. It's just my grandma. And yeah, I think like there's something about the way that my grandma, my abuelita, like views the world and walks through the world with such patience and such grace that like I can't help but be hopeful from it. Yeah, like every day she wakes up, she goes out and she goes to the garden and she tends to the garden. That's the first thing she does every day. She plucks like the dead flowers off of the plants. And I don't know, it's just really beautiful, and it makes me hopeful for sure.
Awesome. I think there's art, which has kind of been part of all that you all have mentioned, in dance, in poetry, in writing, in visual arts. I've now spent far too much money on designer toys, so that's happening. And also for knowing and getting to know younger people like Greer, because I was not doing this at 16 and 17. That kind of knowledge and like wisdom in also just like writing is really wonderful. And we see it with all of you. So really, I thank you all for being here and for bringing yourselves to us in this way. And I hope people enjoyed it. I'm sorry I kept putting links in the chat. And there is a survey, partly because these are ultimately some federal funds that we've gotten, federal to state to us. So there is feedback involved. And so we really do appreciate any of that. And we hope you can join us for more events. We'll have more with Aileen. We'll have more with Kevin, including, talking a little bit more about Farming Hope and environmental justice organizations in San Mateo County and or the Bay Area. So thank you, everyone. And I hope you all have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, panelists, poets, everybody in the audience.
Bye. Thank you.